Good morning. This is Mark Levitt from Zadara, and I will be joined shortly by Sonali Desai from VMware. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes. I want to give everybody a chance to get in, and people are still joining. While we're waiting, Sonali, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a control of the mouse, and let's see if you can advance, okay?
Okay.
I'm just going to open my security features. Never mind. That wants to do a restart of the software, and I don't think, as we just discussed, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give this one more minute, and then we'll get started.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're ready to go now. Again, this is Mark Levitt from Zadara, and I'm joined by Sonali Desai from VMware. This is three, and I should actually say multiple, advanced storage use cases for VMware Cloud on AWS. Thank you very much for joining this morning. I'd like to, again, extend our thanks to our partners at VMware. Sonali, you want to give just a brief description of what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. Hi, this is Sonali Desai. I'm a product marketing manager in VMware, and I'm mainly focusing on VMware Cloud and AWS. And today I'm just going to talk about the overview of VMware Cloud on AWS, what are the typical use cases, and what you can do with this service when you have the existing on-prem VMware infrastructure.
So before we jump into that, what I'd like to do is just put a quick poll up to get an understanding of our audience's familiarity with VMware Cloud on AWS. So if you could just take a minute and tell us whether you're just interested or curious in it, you've tried it, planning on it, or you're currently using it, that would be great. Okay, coming up on 60 seconds. We'll go ahead and close that off. And for if you'd like to see, here's the way the our population today splits out. 60% are interested in it, and Sonali, there you go. 20% are currently using it.
Great.
So understanding that, let's go ahead and get moving on the slides. We're going to talk first, as Sonali said, about VMware Cloud on AWS, cover the basics, help you understand what it is, and then I'm going to take over and talk about what adding Zadara storage to VMware Clouds can do, what kind of use cases we can now support. And then with the time, we will take as many questions as we can. I should say that we, as always, have probably more slides than we should. So if we can't get to the questions, I will make sure we follow up after the seminar. And with that, Sonali.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Hi, this is Sonali Desai. I'm a product marketing manager for VMware Cloud on AWS, and thanks for joining today's webinar. So today I'm going to talk about VMware Cloud on AWS. I'm going to give you the overview of the service and happy to answer your questions. So can you go to the next slide, please? So what exactly is VMware Cloud on AWS? So about 18 months back, VMware and AWS, the two powerhouses and leaders in private and public cloud respectively, they brought a truly differentiated and compelling solution to the market for the customers. So this is a jointly engineered solution that delivers the best of both the worlds, the private cloud and the public cloud. So as you all know, VMware is the leader in compute storage and network virtualization for over 20 years. And VMware is the de facto standard for the enterprise data center. And it supports the broad range of workloads. And Amazon Web Services, it provides the flexible consumption economics. It provides broadest set of cloud services. So today they offer 400 plus different services, and they have a global scale and reach across multiple regions all over the world. Next slide, please. So what are the key differentiated capabilities of VMware Cloud on AWS? So first thing is it is offered as a service. So you get all the rich VMware SDDC capabilities delivered as a cloud service on AWS public cloud. Then it provides you the consistent operations. So there is consistency and familiarity of VMware technologies. So you can use your existing tools and skill sets that you were using on premises and utilize the same tools and skill sets in the cloud. Then the next thing is easy workload portability across the hybrid cloud environment. So you can migrate your workloads bidirectionally between on-prem and the cloud. Then it is very well integrated with the native AWS services. So you get direct access to native AWS services using VMware Cloud on AWS. And the last one is any app. That means that you can have the existing apps as well as the new apps with the containers and VMs deployed in this SDDC. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the service itself. So VMware Cloud on AWS brings the VMware's enterprise class software-defined data center software to AWS public cloud. And it is not a nested virtualization, but it is running on Amazon EC2 bare metal infrastructure.
Much later.
So it enables the customers to run the production applications across vSphere-based private, public, and hybrid cloud environments,
So
and it
I
provides the
click on
optimized
the
access
link.
to
So is
native
it
AWS
counts
services.
one?
This is all delivered, sold, and supported by VMware and its
What's the
partners as
name?
an on-demand service.
I didn't.
So it provides you the full operational consistency. So your IT teams can utilize the existing tools and skill sets that they are familiar with when they were using the on-premises VMware infrastructure. Another advantage here is it provides you the on-demand capacity and flexible consumption options. So it is basically based on pay-as-you-grow model. Then you get the seamless workload portability and hybrid operations so that you can move your workloads bidirectionally as per your needs. It provides direct low latency access to 140 plus native AWS services. So you can modernize your applications using those native AWS services. And last but not the least is you can take advantage of the global AWS footprint, reach, and availability. So we are going to talk about our regional availability in a bit. Next slide, please. So this is what VMware Cloud on AWS under the hood. So with this service, what you get is basically we have multiple gateways, vCenter server and NSX manager to provide you the networking functionality across different layers. And with this service, you get vSphere, vSAN, and NSX along with HTML5 client for vCenter server. And along with that, you get hybrid cloud extension. So that allows you to have a large scale rapid workload migration capability from on-prem to cloud. So it migrates 10 times faster than the conventional methods, and it provides you the hybrid connectivity to your on-premises sites. And the good part is this is already included in VMware Cloud and AWS service, so you don't have to pay extra for using VMware HCX. So with this service, you get the vSAN storage cluster that is NVMe flash storage, which is a 15 terabyte raw capacity, and you get the NSX network virtualization that is 10 gig plus speed for the networking. And you get the standalone cloud cluster, and if you have existing Amazon VPC, then you can connect directly between the Amazon VPC and VMware VPC while using VMware Cloud on AWS. And another very important point to note here is this is a single tenant bare metal Amazon EC2 hardware. So it is not a multi-tenant. You are not sharing the infrastructure with anyone else. It is just the single tenant dedicated bare metal infrastructure. And also it is not a nested virtualization. So it doesn't affect any latency or any such issues. Next slide, please. So this is our regional availability today. So today we are available across 13 different regions spanning from US West, US East, Europe, and Asia Pacific. And we are available across multiple availability zones across these regions. And as you can see here, within next year, we are planning to make this service available across all regions where AWS has availability today. Next slide, please. So these are the typical customer-driven use cases. When we talk to the customers, they typically use VMware Cloud on AWS for these 4 use cases. So the first one is a data center extension. So under data center extension, there are multiple scenarios where customers want to use this service. First one is footprint expansion. So they want to expand to different regions all over the world, but they don't want to build the new data centers in those regions. Also, some customers, they want to meet the on-demand capacity needs. Like, for example, if there are any seasonal spikes or if there are any on-demand on-demand requirement for their temporary workers. Also, there is another scenario where they want to use the virtual desktops and published apps for their contractors for temporary period of time, and then they want to tear that environment down after their need has been satisfied. Then another scenario is the test dev environment. So some customers, they don't want to migrate the production workloads to VMware Cloud and AWS, but they just want to migrate test dev workloads, and they are using VMware Cloud and AWS for that. Then the second very important use case is disaster recovery. So customers want to build a new DR, or they want to replace the existing DR or complement the existing DR, and they want to use VMware Cloud on AWS for their disaster recovery situations. So another advantage of using VMware Cloud on AWS for DR is they can reduce their secondary DR costs if they are going to use the secondary DR as on-prem DR site. Then the third important use case is cloud migration. So customers want to do the application specific migrations, or they want to migrate their business critical applications like SAP, Oracle, or Microsoft SQL Server, and then they want to modernize those applications. Some customers, they actually want to do a data center wide evacuation and want to completely migrate to the cloud, because there are reasons like their lease is going, colo facility lease is going to get expired, and they want to completely migrate to the cloud. Or some customers want to do the infrastructure refresh and want to temporarily migrate to cloud, and once the refresh is done, then move back to on-prem. And the last but not the least, very important use case is next generation applications. So as I mentioned, that we provide direct low latency access to native AWS services, and then customers can do the application modernization or build out new applications using those native services. Next slide, please. So here I would like to talk about a couple of customer examples where they used VMware Cloud on AWS for their use cases. So first one is Platica. So this is one of the world's largest global online gaming company, and it offers free casino-style games to social networks. Perform uninterrupted live migration of over 650 workloads to the cloud in just 5 days. Please. So this is another example of Stagecoach. So Stagecoach is a leading public transport company in UK, and their main use case was around next generation applications. So their challenge was they wanted to migrate their mission critical applications to the cloud and wanted to modernize those applications by integrating with native AWS services. So they used VMware Cloud on AWS stretch clusters to ensure that they maintain that application resiliency. And today they have 99.99% available stretch cluster that runs 45 terabytes of application that tracks the location of 8,000 buses across UK every 30 seconds. So they were able to migrate this mission critical application just over the weekend using VMware Cloud on AWS. Next slide, please. So this is the list of some of our customers across various industries and segments. And I'm happy to say that we are doubling down our number of customers every quarter. Next slide, please. So here is the VMware Cloud on AWS packaging structure that I would like to share. So with this service, what you get is you get basically the vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and VMware HCX. And this is all software, the VMware software that is running on AWS infrastructure. So as a package, you get the hardware that is AWS infrastructure, and you get all the VMware software, SDDC stack. And on top of that, if you want to purchase the optional add-ons like Stretch Cluster or VMware Site Recovery, then you have to pay extra for that. So the key characteristics of this packaging structure is it is a simple and flexible packaging structure. So you get the core service that includes all the elements of the entire SDDC stack, and you have the optional add-ons if you want to purchase it according to your needs. Then you have three options to purchase this service. So you can purchase it on demand. So this is basically on hourly price. Then you have two options, 1 year and 3 year subscription options, where you can actually save approximately 30% to 50% of your costs versus on demand. And also, if you are existing VMware customer using on-premises VMware infrastructure, then you get additional discounts through our hybrid loyalty program. So if you want to learn more about our pricing and packaging structure and our hybrid loyalty program, you can visit our website and you can go look through the FAQs to learn more about this. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we provide the flexible consumption models. So these are the 3 consumption models I already mentioned. Then we provide various payment methods. So you can actually buy VMware SPP or HPP credits, or you can create a purchase order, or you can use the credit card. So basically, if you are trying a single host for some POC or something, then you can definitely go for a credit card. It won't be a advisable option for the large purchase, but if you are just trying it for a month or so, you can definitely go for that. And as I mentioned, you can take advantage of the hybrid loyalty program if you are already using VMware infrastructure on premises and you have purchased the on-prem licenses. Next slide, please. And this is our fastest growing VMware Cloud and AWS technology partner ecosystem. So we have our technology partners who have validated their solutions on VMware Cloud and AWS. So if you are already using some of these solutions, like for example, Zadara. So if you are already using these solutions on-prem, then you can use the same solution in VMware Cloud and AWS. Next slide, please. And currently we are running these promotions. So if you haven't already tested out the service, then I would recommend that you should go for our single host SDDC, and you get 20% off for the first 3 months. So essentially you will pay only $5.60 per hour. And then you can try out the service, you can build a demo or POC, and once you get the feel of the service, then you can jump up to 3 hosts. So with 3 hosts, we are offering a promotion where you are paying only for the 2 hosts, and in that price you are getting 3 hosts. So I would encourage that you should take advantage of these 2 promotions that are running right now. Next slide, please. Here are other 2 promotions. So the first one is regarding the Direct Connect service. So you will get free 90-day Direct Connect service for all the new VMware Cloud and AWS customers. And also for the add-on, as I mentioned, VMware Site Recovery that you can use for your disaster recovery use cases. So for that add-on, we are providing the free VMware Site Recovery add-on to protect up to 200 VMs for 90 days on VMware Cloud and AWS. So you can get more information about this promotion on the web link that is provided here. Next slide, please. And if you want to learn more about the service, here are a bunch of resources. So this is our website. You can find us on Twitter. We are very active on Twitter. And you can find us on YouTube. So on YouTube, we have different overview videos, demo videos, then our past webinars, and also you can hear it directly from our customers and partners. Then there is a VMware Cloud and AWS hands-on lab that is a 90 minutes hands-on lab that gives you the first-hand immersive experience of the service. And you can read through various blogs. And here is our solution brief and our TCO one-pager, where you can compare your on-prem cost or your native cloud instance cost versus VMware Cloud and AWS. And you can go through the release notes to understand the latest updates or the upcoming roadmap items for this service. Next slide, please. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So I'll hand it over to Mark. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sonali. So right before we jump into the storage side of it and talk about how Zadara can help you extend the advantages that Sonali talked about for VMware Cloud on AWS, got another quick poll. I want to understand, what are your top 3 concerns when you talk about cloud storage? And I'm going to launch that now and give it about a minute to collect input. Okay, and we've got our votes in, and here's what it looked like. Should surprise absolutely nobody that security is the #1 concern by a good margin, followed by performance, which makes sense because, of course, when we talk about clouds, we can be a long way from the storage, and that's an important consideration. And then you can see the rest. Yeah, that was very helpful. Thank you very much for that. And let's talk about those kind of issues. Hide those results, and let's get to work. Okay, what we want to talk about is how your storage and your enterprise storage as a service can be as agile as your VMware Cloud. There's not a lot of point to having all that agility in a VMware Cloud if you can't take advantage of it with your storage and more importantly, your application data. So by way of a quick introduction, as we've learned from Sonali, VMware Cloud on AWS is a great cloud with respect and affection for our partners at VMware. From Zadara's perspective, we see some limited storage flexibility with that offering that we intend and are addressing. So it's a very powerful package, but it doesn't offer complete solution for actually moving data around, for sharing it across environments, for sharing it across data centers, things like that. So what we see is that it's really good in the software-defined data center when you try and share storage level data with, say, native AWS VPCs. That's not an option. You can certainly share services, but talking about sharing data at this level, talking about sharing with other clouds, other public clouds, other clouds with service providers, or in fact on premises. Now on premises you can certainly do with this, and I'll have a use case discussion about that. But something to keep in mind is that as you migrate applications, especially if you look at a goal of application mobility where you can move it back and forth, say between on-premises and your AWS VMware clouds, if the data for your application has to move with it, that can incur some significant egress charges. Okay, so it can be done, but it can be expensive. And our argument is that what you really need to do is adopt a storage architecture that takes control of all your clouds, that makes your data available to all the clouds that you have. And that's why we do cloud adjacent storage that is extremely flexible, that is delivered as a service, and that delivers all of the enterprise features that you would expect, such that you can go ahead and share with the environments we talked about. So here's our complementary map to Sonali's map, and you'll see some suspicious alignment here. We are currently in 16 AWS regions and counting. It takes us something between about 2 weeks to bring a new region online, and we are customer driven, so that gives you a good idea of where our customers are right now. The bottom line is that we have excellent coverage for all of your VMware Cloud on AWS requirements. So let's talk a little bit about what goes into all those locations, what goes into our storage clouds. I'm not going to do this slide in great detail. This is what we call the solutions architect version of this slide. The marketing version is much less detailed, but it should be a basic architecture that anybody familiar with VMware is pretty comfortable with. What we do is we create virtual private storage arrays. Those are the rectangles on the left, and they have different characteristics and be configured different ways. But the key thing is, as with the discussion that Sonali had about about VMware Cloud on AWS, we run on our own bare metal, and we, in these cases, resources are locked to these virtual arrays. So the CPUs, the RAM, and the storage, and the virtual networks are all dedicated to virtual arrays, and customers can then create as many or as few virtual arrays as they want to match the storage profiles that they need to support. So just to underline, they are dedicated resources. They are dedicated to customers, and within customers, they can be dedicated to specific use cases because they are virtual and easily created and destroyed. They can be scaled up, they can be scaled down, and they can be scaled out. So that's what we call the multi-tenant efficiency with a single tenant experience. And just to underline, each array does have their own software-defined networking. They have private VLANs and SRIOV separation. And get the mouse in the right place. Dedicated resources, so the drives are dedicated, the vCPUs are dedicated, and the ability to scale up, out, and down. This is all pay as you go, billed by the hour, and billed for what you actually consume. It also includes integrated chargeback, so you can do chargeback or showback within your environments. A lot of customers like that feature a lot. Even if you're not billing back, it's sometimes really useful to be able to show back to internal organizations about the resources they're consuming. So let's talk about use cases. The base use case is just getting Zadara into your VMware Cloud. So we have to have something to get it into. Here's our VMware Cloud. And you'll notice that I'm not being specific here about where this is located. That's part of the way our storage is. Our architecture says we don't actually care very much. We are subject to physics, but this particular cloud could be on premises, that could be at AWS. For this base use case, it doesn't matter. What we're going to do is add some Zadara storage, carve out some file systems and some block in this case, and then present it to our cloud. And congratulations, you just did it. If you want a little more detail than that on how to actually do it, we do have a technical brief, and here's the URL for that. That actually takes you step by step, setting from signing up for Zadara and signing up for the single server case that Sonali talked about, and then step by step how to present Zadara storage to your VMware Cloud. Once you do that, though, what you get for it, still having trouble with the mouse. Yep. Okay. What you get for it, and the features that we're going to focus on for this webinar, I can and I do talk for a long time and cover a lot of distance about all of the things you get for it. But for today, for the use cases we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on keyword flexibility, and specifically, we have data replication flexibility, which includes snapshots, clones, and remote mirroring. We have storage medium flexibility. It can be all flash, it can be all hard disk, it can be hybrid flash plus hard disk. Storage type, it can be file, block, object, and the object supports S3 and Swift. The file can be NFS2 or 3, as well as CIFS. And for the block, it could be iSCSI or Fiber Channel. So tremendous flexibility in how you present your storage. As I mentioned in the setup for this slide, very flexible on location. So we can have the actual physical storage residing in Zadara hosted facilities. They could be on premises in your facilities, they could be in colos, they can be in managed service provider partners that we have. They can support private, public, or multi-cloud, or one of the very few, very small handful of storage companies that actually have multi-cloud customers in production now and have for a couple of years. And then lastly, again, for these use cases, we're going to talk about Microsoft Enterprise Application Support, specifically 3 features: Volume Snapshot Service, or VSS, Windows Server Failover Clustering, and Active Directory. Yeah. So let's get to the first actual use case, and these are going to line up pretty well with what Sonali talked about for VMware Cloud. Starting with data center extension. Now I'm going to deal with this in 2 different scenarios. The first scenario is going to be what I would call a local extension. So this is the physics piece, and we're going to assume that all these pieces are within a metro area, so that network latencies are small, on the order of 1 to maybe 2 milliseconds. That's to maintain storage performance, which is a big concern we saw on the polling. So we're going to start with the VMware Cloud, but this time we're going to be more specific and say this cloud is going to be on premises. All right, so this is the VMware Cloud that you know and love, that you've built over the last several years. And now we need some place to extend it to. So we're going to use VMware Cloud on AWS for all the reasons that Sonali talked about, to be able to transfer your investments, both organizationally and in software, to your extension. And the beauty of this approach is that because we are independent of location, by following the same steps that you did to present the Zadara storage to the cloud in the previous discussion, you now can present it to both places, and that's it. Your data center extension is done in a local area. And a nice thing also about data center extension is that when we talk about migration, if your objective was actually to migrate to the cloud, then the only step, well, let me do this at benefits first. You notice we did not have to do any migration. There was no initial migration, and subsequently you can do bidirectional data movement or application movement without moving the data because it is independent of your location. Same copies of data, and that's same copies of data, so you don't have to create new copies, you don't have to do anything like that, can be shared between on-premises and, for instance, AWS-based VMware clouds. And that gets us past the migration and creates the ability to actually share workloads between on and off premises. And then replicated data can be presented anywhere, anywhere you can reach with the internet anyway. So for applications like analytics, machine learning, or application consistent backups, update verification, test dev, pretty much anything you can think of using replications for, you can put them anywhere. Now, as I was about to say, the difference between an extension and a cloud migration in this local case is basically that you then retire or repurpose your on-premises equipment, and congratulations, you're now fully on the cloud. Now, what if either you're in a situation where the geographic distances are greater, or you really want to deal with the disaster recovery case, and those tend to be closely linked. So we'll start with the same basic diagram. We're on premises and we're also in the cloud. We have our Zadara storage. We're going to talk about business continuity first. So because it's a continuity discussion, we have to have separate storage. All right, the storage is very high availability, but a hot flaming rock falling from space will in fact reduce its performance substantially. So we need to guard against that case as well as guard against regional outages in our AWS environments for the same kind of reasons. You know, it's not that the regions themselves aren't very highly available, but if they get hit by a rock or covered by a flood or an earthquake or tornado, whatever, that's why we do business continuity. All we need to do is between the virtual storage arrays that we've set up remote mirroring. And whether you're doing file data or block data doesn't matter. And once we've selected what gets mirrored where and let it sync up, you're there, you're done, your data is now protected. And again, what that gets us is, okay, so that's our business continuity case. So we've done data extension, data center extension, we've done business continuity with very simple steps. And then if this was actually a migration over geographic distance such that we can't just leave the data in one place, we just had to go ahead and say we're going to sync all of our data from our original location over to the upper or new location, and then we've accomplished migration over distance. Okay, let's take another case. Backing up. This one can be tricky. For those of you involved in backing up, we all know that is a really challenging. It's not even a topic so much as it's material from many doctoral dissertations. But I want to present a couple of options you have here just to get you thinking about ways to solve problems. And the first one's going to be pretty straightforward. We're back to our basic setup. What we're going to do, though, in this case, is we're going to actually back up to object stores. And the reason I have that drawn in a cloud right now is merely to indicate that we want that to be someplace else, right? It's not in our AWS region. It's not in wherever our Zadara storage is, because we want it to be, when we're done, key objective here will be to have offsite nearline backups. And there's a couple ways to get this done, or at least a few. So we're going to move that over there. And the first case is pretty straightforward. You're going to take your favorite enterprise backup solution. And I mentioned Commvault and Veeam because they're both partners of ours and we have solutions with them. And you're going to just go ahead and use access here to backup. And you can be backing, in this case, you can back up storage that's on your VPSAs, on your Zadara storage. You can also back up data that is on your vSAN, which is another key use case here. There is a trick though, because packages like this generally require intermediate storage to package up the backup before they send it to object. And so given that we've already got Zadara in our picture, one very simple way to solve this problem is to present storage that is got the right price performance balance for handling your backups to go ahead and provide this intermediate storage. It's not usually an extremely high performance environment. It doesn't have to be very fast. It doesn't have to be very expensive, is the translation. But you can do it ideally here. Now you could conceivably do that on the vSAN storage, but in the case of VMware Cloud on AWS, you're talking about an all-flash storage entity that also replicates between your servers here. So that tends to consume a lot of capacity, and it tends to consume some very high value, high performance capacity. So if you have lots of excess capacity with your vSAN, go ahead, you're set. Otherwise, this is a good way to go ahead and deal with this problem and get it worked on in a cost-effective and efficient manner before it gets sent out for backup. So that, and other than that, it's just how you would generally do your Commvault or your Veeam. Now, we have another option, which is considerably simpler. Commvault and Veeam, for all their capabilities, and they have very many capabilities, are somewhat complex to operate. What we offer as an alternative for operations that think this is attractive is a very simple package that we call Backup to Object Store. And what it does for you is it actually runs the backups on the virtual storage, in the virtual storage itself. So there's no software to run, maintain, patch, or otherwise operate in your hosts. This all runs in the storage. You can schedule it. You can decide, what your backup frequency is and what gets backed up and all those kind of things. It's got that kind of functionality. But then it'll on the back end, it'll just go ahead and send it to any S3 compliant object store. Now, we think you should always use Zadara object stores, but you don't have to. This can be going to S3 in a different region or any other S3 compatible storage. One key power of the object store is that once you have completed a backup, that backup data can be presented back through another virtual private storage array and is now instantly mountable. So if you want to do things like, well, let's talk about what you can do. You can verify your backed up data. You could do single file restores. You can also use this as a replication strategy, running in the background if you want to replicate data globally. Populate analytics data sets, that's a big use case right now for object stores. And low cost disaster recovery. It's not, it's significantly higher latency when you're running off of this, but you can actually have this be your disaster recovery copies if you have the freedom and the flexibility to recover over time as opposed to recover immediately. So there's some really good use cases for this. But the bottom line is, whichever way you go, you can knock the backup. And in many cases, in fact, many of our customers are in fact operating in both cases. Okay, almost lastly, gonna actually move up to the application layer a little bit. You may have seen the application icons reshuffle a little bit, so I can set this up. We're talking about just some things you can do given that you're running a Windows Server failover cluster in this environment. And what we're going to do is have that cluster some SQL servers, and they're going to hammer away at some storage, and it's running along. And then at some point, we're going to decide, hey, we want to take a clone of that data because we're going to go work on it for the kind of use cases we talked about. We're going to take that clone over, and we're going to present it to another instance. Now, the beauty of a clone is that it is a writable copy. It takes initially takes zero capacity. And then only consumes capacity as either the base volume changes, so our production servers go back to work on it, or as our third instance SQL Server here goes ahead and creates changes and does tests and maybe anonymizes data, that those changes then start to consume capacity. But until that point, it's a zero capacity copy, as are our snapshots. So we can use this cloned production volume to do several things, including populate, again, analytics data sets, test new versions and patches. If we want to take a production database and test the latest updates to SQL Server or post-processing or whatever is in your workflow, you can take that, test it on real data, test it to destruction, do whatever you need. And it will not affect your production database. And anonymized data, I mentioned that briefly. That's now a GDPR requirement for a lot of the analytics work that's being done, is that before you do your work, it has to, anything personally identifiable needs to be taken out. So that would be a case for where you need writable data. And then you can do all of that at the same time because you can make as many clones as you want. Furthermore, as you saw our extension diagrams before, you can take those clones and present them wherever you want. So we have another VMware Cloud here that's elsewhere. It could even be in the same facility, it doesn't matter for our purposes here. But the point is that we can create these copies, we can use them for lots of different reasons, and we can present them to wherever you need them. Okay, one last, it's somewhere between a use case and a trick that you may be able to do, may help you with your SQL Server and with some licensing costs. So if you run Windows failover clustering and you have multiple SQL Server databases and you have Microsoft software assurance, so we satisfy the requirements, and the reason you need the clustered SQL Server is for availability, not so much for performance. So your performance requirements on any of your databases can be satisfied with a single instance, but you're using the clustering to make sure that those databases are always available. Then you may be able to leverage the failover server with SQL to do active passive failover. So have different instances working on different databases, but identifying each other as their failover partner in the event of a failure. And that allows you to use standard SQL Server licenses instead of enterprise licenses. Now, if that looks like it might be interesting to you, I suggest you discuss that with your Microsoft rep and understand how the trade-offs are for you between SQL Server licenses, standard and enterprise, and also what the software assurance, how that plays out. But we have some customers using this, and the main key here is that you have to have support for all those pieces. You have to be able to support the failover clustering. You may, in this case, need to also be have that connected to AD. And when you have all those pieces, then you have the flexibility to explore interesting ways to optimize your operations. All right, let's sum it up, and then we'll get to some questions. Zadara for VMware Cloud on AWS is simple, flexible, and powerful. You can basically have pretty much any kind of storage you want. It can be presented any way you want. You can define what is the right balance of price and performance for the applications you need to run. And uniquely, we offer 100% uptime SLA. And that's not planned or unplanned or anything. That's just uptime. It is enterprise storage as a service, and every word there is important. It is enterprise. We have the features, the availability, the ability to move data around, and it is storage as a service. Right? We support your enterprise applications, we enable your critical use cases, scale up, down, out, and we back it up with 7x24 support from real live storage experts who will help you through pretty much anything you want to do. Our customers absolutely love our support. And all taken together, it is the perfect match for VMware Cloud on AWS. So at this point, if you have some questions, I'd be happy to take them in the time remaining. Yeah, sorry, I have a question. Is NFS4 on the roadmap? I need to check on. I don't think it's on the roadmap. I think it's actually in the support, and I need to check that. But we're aggressively supporting that, and I will check and see if I missed something there. Okay. Another question asking about snapshots. Yeah, I didn't touch on snapshots in this particular presentation. Snapshots, in fact, are the basis of clones, and they're also the basis of the backup to object store. So it's an important piece that we use. And for those who aren't familiar, the difference between a snapshot and a clone, at least in our usage, is that a snapshot is a read-only copy, point-in-time copy, and that's integrated with VSS, so you get application consistent backups. And then from those, we make the clones, for instance. So there's a question about APIs. Yeah, everything that we can do with our with our GUIs and our management consoles is all based on our APIs. So everything that the management console can do, including provisioning and deprovisioning storage, expanding it, doing seamless volume migrations, taking snapshots, things like that. That can all be done with through an API. That can all be scripted, and we have some tools for that. So we have a question on avoiding egress charges in the case that I talked about. Yeah, so the case there is simply that when your data exists outside, in this case, outside of AWS, then even if you have to move it, so if you have to move it between two Zadara locations, then you don't pay AWS egress charges because AWS isn't moving the data for you, right? That's the charge that AWS puts on the board to pay for their networking capabilities. If you're not using those networking capabilities, you don't have to pay for them. And in the case where you actually have a cloud, I would say a VMware Cloud on AWS, an SDDC running in AWS, and you have equivalent clouds or compatible clouds on premises, for instance, and they're all located within the same city, then you're not moving data at all, and so there are no egress charges at all. Question on the 100% uptime SLA. Does it require HA config in both customer prem and chosen cloud platform? What we're providing the SLA for is uptime for the virtual private storage itself. So no is the short answer. If you're trying, the HA configurations, when we're talking about, at least when we're talking about like remote mirroring, that's to absolutely protect against data loss, or that is to protect against data loss. We can't guarantee that you're not going to lose data if you lose a site, but we will guarantee that your storage will be available. And if a hot flaming rock hits it from outer space, then then you get to collect on the SLA. We will all hope that doesn't happen. Okay, we're just about up against the time limit today. I'd like to once again thank Sonali Desai for joining me from VMware to talk about VMware Cloud on AWS, and thank everybody who has stayed with us and joined us for this. Hopefully you will join us again. And so my last poll, if I could just ask you to do one more, which is, what would you most like to learn about in subsequent iterations? Would you like to learn about more about extending VMware Cloud environments, or VMware environments, enterprise storage as a service on premises, enterprise storage as a service for cloud, backup strategy for public clouds, or optimizing support for existing enterprise applications? And we'll leave that open for 60 seconds. All right, so yeah, hopefully you saw those results, but it looked like there was a lot of response for learning more about extending VMware, and then the other results as you see it. Thanks very much for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you next time. And thanks again to our partners at VMware.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.